to everyone in the back, too. This is an amazing moment, and it's so amazing that I'm going to ask everyone to do something. Some of you will love this, some of you will hate this, and some of you have no idea how to do it. And it's going to be a selfie. So, if your phone's off, turn them on. And this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it all together. So bring out your phones, and when you take a selfie, you want to actually look at the camera lens. You don't want to stare at the screen, because if you stare at the screen, the reflection coming back to you is you looking down. So I want you looking in your eyes. And on the count of 3, we're going to do it together. Everyone hold in their right hand, all right? 1, 2, 3. Now everyone pull up their image. There's a lot of funny images out there. How many of you looked back at the image, raise your hand, and your first response, if you're being honest, was negative? Oh. It's a sea of people. Okay. And how many of you wish that day to day your negative critic was a little bit quieter? Raise your hand. How many of you beat yourself up too much and you know it, but you can't stop doing it? Raise your hand. So I'm going to teach you something that's going to quiet that voice and bring out who you truly are, which I call your best self. There's a mantra that I do. It's called the Bestop Mantra, and I did it before I came out here, and a few gentlemen saw me do it. I don't know where they are, and they're probably like, what is he doing in the bathroom? And I do this everywhere I go, especially if I'm speaking to a large group of people, because I want to get out of ego and I truly want to help, and I don't want it to be about me. And I wish it was somewhere besides the bathroom, but that's just where it happened to be. It's something that I learned when I first got sober, and I do this. When I got sober, I was willing to go any lengths, and they told me, get on your knees and pray. So what I do is I was in the bathroom here, and I was hoping no one was in there, but there were. And I hop on my knees, I jump back up, I look at myself directly in my eyes, just like you did in the selfie, and I give myself a mantra. Whether it be, you got this, believe in yourself, you're amazing, whatever I need to do to get through so I can be the best version of myself. I was not always this happy-go-lucky. I got sober at 22 because I had a lot of emotional issues growing up. Started going to therapy at 13. Once I realized there were drugs that you could use to medicate feelings, I started using those. I was pretty unhappy. I couldn't control the voices in my head. And so at 22 years old, I went into treatment for crystal meth addiction. So since we're all relating, how many of you have gone into treatment for crystal meth addiction? Okay. There's no one. Usually there's one. This is an HR event, so everyone's a little more boundaried. Okay, how about this then? How many of you are recovering or recovered from the way you were raised because of maybe how you were parented? Okay. How many of you have felt like you got into recovery from time to time because you had an employee that you sat down with, or an employer, and it was a traumatic experience like none other? And how many of you reach the point in your life where there's a moment where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you're willing to go to any lengths to change, and you're just like, tell me what to do, I want to be told what to do? Raise your hand. Awesome. So, this mantra I would do, and I became a counselor and interventionist. I did not think I would ever be working with entertainers. I did terrible in school growing up. I was held back in kindergarten and the 8th grade. My parents said it was for me advancing in sports. It was really, I was a poor student even when I tried, had plenty of learning disabilities. And I never thought I would go on this journey, and all of a sudden I started going off on this journey. And I'm sure by show of hands, because we're all participating, how many of you thought when you were a little girl or a little boy that your career was what it's going to be today? Yeah, there's usually like 2 or 3, but no one here was like, when I grow up, I want to be an HR professional. And I gotta say, people say to me, like, Mike, I don't know how you do it. You deal with so many issues of people, and don't you go home, and what about you, Mike? Are you taking care of you? And I gotta say, when I was coming here, I was so excited because you guys have the hardest job. You literally balance out a company. You have to work through like the ethics, the integrity. You have to follow the vision of the CEO. You have to deal with some like extremely challenging employees. You have to deal with people's excuses. You have to learn how to treat everyone fairly. You're carrying that all on your back. You're really the backbone of a business. You're usually underpaid, overworked. I mean, that's what I believe. So what I want to do is take this moment where you high five your number and you're the person next to you and just say, you're awesome. So just give each other some love right now. So everyone has kind of had a partner too, and this is good. I didn't want to come out here and just give you because I'm a coach, it wasn't about me giving you an inspiring story. I wanted you to know a little bit about me. I really am interested in how I can help you guys leave this period of time that we have as a better version of yourself. And so I'm gonna ask you guys to do an exercise soon, and it's an exercise that I've done with my clients for years. And like I shared before, I was doing this mantra where I constantly got on my knees, hopped back up, look in the mirror, and eventually, which I'm sure some of you can relate to, your career just isn't fulfilling anymore. You don't love it. I'm sure there's some people in the room right now even that are like, God, this is so great being in Toronto. I can get away from, and it's almost like a mini vacation. And I reached that point. All of a sudden I was traveling the world and I just wasn't fulfilled. I missed helping people, and I didn't know how to do it. So I did what anyone would do, and I decided to go to Iraq. Kurdistan, Iraq, Dahuk, and I went alone. And this is a little over 2 years ago. And the guy's pointing to me because we're going to a refugee camp where I'm meeting with women who are misplaced, whose husbands have all been lined up and shot and killed by ISIS. Their daughters are gone. They're now sex trafficked, and they're no longer in the home, and the government of Kurdistan, which isn't recognized as a government yet, is trying to buy them back for the families. The sons are traumatized because their dads have been shot, and then they're basically forced to join ISIS. If they were able to escape, they were kind of just there, and they're running around, and people are misplaced, and there's millions of people, and it was shocking to me. It was shocking. And any of you who have visited abroad some of these refugee camps, you will see just terror. You'll see pain in people's eyes that you can't even it's tragic. And I was like, I'm gonna do something about it. I know all these people, and I'm gonna do something about it. And I flew back all excited. I was like, I could get on a music tour, we could sell t-shirts so these people have jobs, and we could sell bracelets. I was really willing to do whatever it took. And to my surprise, I was met with, from publicists, that part of the world's a little too polarizing right now. And the people who were really affluent that I knew were kind of like, man, we got a lot of other causes we're dealing with right now. And so I was like, what do I do? I eventually want to help these people. What am I supposed to do? How do I do this? And everyone around me was just, I talked about it so much, you would have thought I was Kurdish, because I was like, we got to do something. We got to do every meeting I had. And then it dawned on me that, it's fascinating that celebrities today have such big platforms that they can literally tweet something out, and depending on the country will respond to a celebrity's tweet. That's the culture we live in today. And from working with entertainers, I realized the power of your voice when you're big enough and people care what you have to say. And at the time, I didn't have an audience. I didn't have a demo. There was no Coach Mike. People didn't know who I was. And so in that day, I made a decision. I said, I am going to leverage myself and my brand to be as big as possible so that I can help people, so that I can make a difference. And when you make a decision that you're going to live differently, and all of a sudden life opens up, and you're like, oh, it's a sign. Well, I went to lunch on March 26, 2018, and I was bringing the Jonas Brothers manager, his name's Phil McIntyre, and I was bringing him to lunch with an icon. And we went into a restaurant, and the icon's typing behind the computer, and he's Dr. Phil. Have you guys ever heard of Dr. Phil? Okay. So Dr. Phil has the #1 television program for years in the United States of America. He single-handedly has made mental health a topic of conversation that people have. There aren't a lot of shows like this on television, especially in America or the world. And we went to lunch, and all of a sudden the meeting turned where they said, have you ever been on television? I said, no, I haven't been on television. He goes, why don't you come on a show? And 3 days later, I went on a show. 40 episodes later, I'm standing right here. I went from writing, doing terrible in school. I'm getting choked up a little bit because like when you feel that pain, when you really feel like you're just not good enough. And then you get to the other side of it and you're like, God, I can't believe I did that. And I'm having one of those moments. So thanks for bearing with me. Thank you. So I've done 40 episodes. I wrote a New York Times bestseller, sold 250,000 books in a year, writing a second book. And I started being on television, and I started being able to use my voice and platform to do good. And I did the exercise, which I'm going to be asking you guys to do on the shows, which again allowed me to help more people by getting on television shows. It's even being on TV brought me here, because someone saw me and was like, bring Mike out. So thank you guys. So I went on television and I did what I'm gonna have you guys do, which is the best self exercise. So I was the first ever guest host on The Talk every day of the week, which is a talk show. And I had all these entertainers doing this exercise, Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, and you're gonna be drawing a little bit, and I'm not expecting anyone to be the best artist. It can be a cloud, it can be a line, and we'll get to that point. So when we talked initially about how do we quiet that voice in the head, I want you to write about that voice right now, and that voice I'm calling the AntiSelf, okay? So you have a piece of paper on your table. There's 6 lines, and what I'm going to have you all do is think about when you're in your current job, when what I would call your anti-self comes out. So for me, when I feel like I'm being in my anti-self, I've owned a treatment center for over 14 years. I have a bunch of employees. When I feel overwhelmed or stressed, I end up becoming stubborn, isolated. I find myself to be insufferable, like I can't stand myself, but I can't get away from myself, I get impatient. Whatever you do that when you're not operating at who you truly are, I want you to write that down. I'm gonna give you a minute to write it down. So you're gonna write it down starting now. The next part of this exercise is you're gonna name it and draw it. I'm gonna show you mine. The reason why we name it and draw it is if you look at any of your current adjectives that you just put down as your anti-self, if someone actually pointed that out to you and said, you're so defensive, you're not gonna be like, you're so right, I'm defensive. Or if somebody says, you weren't prepared. You're not gonna be like, thank you so much for telling me to prepare more often, right? You're gonna have a reaction. And the reason why we create a character is it adds a little bit of humor and it brings something to life and it allows us to identify something. So my anti-self is a witch. It's a male witch. And I call him Angelos. Angelos is the Greek god of provocation. Angelos is insufferable. I found it to be a male witch because, first of all, I haven't seen that many male witches in books, so they kind of feel like a loner. And that's how I feel when I'm being Angelos. I also feel like witches don't hang out with other people. They're kind of just angry, stirring their pots. And so that's why I have a witch. Whatever represents your anti-self, you're also gonna name it. So I'm doing this very quickly with you, so it's gonna be a bit challenging to come up with names and images right away, but if you can't think of a name for your anti-self, think of a food you don't like. So like Mr. Cauliflower or Mrs. Cauliflower, cauliflower. So that's a simple way of doing this, but you're gonna draw it and write it out. So now the partner you high-five to begin with is your partner who you're gonna share this with. Now, if you're feeling too vulnerable, or just want it to be the cone of silence, you're gonna put out your pinky and hook it into their pinky and just say cone of silence. This doesn't go anywhere, okay? So people often ask, so pairs of twos, ideally not three ways. We're at an HR event. So I'm gonna say go, and you're gonna share for 1 minute, and then we're gonna switch. Sound good? How many of you just shared with either a stranger or someone you know parts of yourself, and it was either kind of funny or didn't feel that bad? Raise your hand. It's pretty cool, right? So next we're gonna get into being your best self. So before coming into the public eye, people would call me kind of a wizard behind the scenes. I always loved magical things. I played Magic the Gathering growing up. Yes, there's a guy over there who loves it. It's kind of a nerdy card game. I loved it. I just thought it was so much fun. And I always just have loved fantasy, Terry Brooks novels, what have you. And when I created this exercise, I figured, okay, let me list out the characteristics of me when I'm being my best, which I would see as a wizard. So I'm wise, I'm kind, compassionate, great leader. I'll listen to people. I won't talk over them. I'm free. I feel like I'm 1,000 years old. And I just love life. And we all know you're all uniquely you. There's aspects of you that are incredibly brilliant that we just need to shine brighter. So this is our opportunity to understand that. So what you're gonna do now is you're gonna take a minute and write down what are adjectives that describe you when you're being at your best. There's a lot less laughing when people talk about being their best, but it does feel good. It feels really good. So what you're gonna do, I'll share with you mine. Mine clearly, as I've represented, is a wizard, and it's a wizard named Merlin. And I believe this stuff so much that I have Merlin tattooed on my arm. If I lost my arm, I'd put it on my leg because I have to be constantly reminded to be my best self because I believe this stuff so much. It's also a great tool for kids if you have kids trying to figure out emotionally what's going on with them. I've done this exercise with a lot of parents where I put parents in one room and kids in another and they had to guess what their kid was struggling with. Not one parent guessed it. And it's fascinating because it's a way for them to articulate what's going on inside of them. So you're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. You're gonna create your best self. And if you can't come up with a name, it can be your first pet's name and the street you grew up on. So mine would be like Delight Flintlock. You're now gonna spend 2 minutes instead of 1 minute because it's very important for you to tell your partner who you are when you're being your best self. And when you do it, own it. Talk about the resilient woman. Talk about the person who's so kind that everyone loves to be around. Talk about the amazing parent. Really be braggadocious about it if you can, okay? I want you to write down the last time, what the situation was. It could have happened today, could have happened last year, it could have happened this month. What was the situation, and you can do this while I'm talking, what is the situation that brought out your anti-self? What work situation brought out your anti-self? What you're gonna do with your partner now, and you'll do it briefly, and it shouldn't take too long, is you're gonna share with your partner how your best self would have handled it, that same situation, so that you can create awareness of how you can now handle it moving forward. So share that with your partner now. How many of you guys felt better about how your best self could handle that same work situation? Raise your hand. How many of you are convinced that your anti-self was the best scenario with that work situation? There's always a couple. We all have a time to get insight into ourselves. The time is now. So, we have created your anti-self. We got the description. We know when that's going to come out at work. We've created your best self. We've thought of a work situation that's going to bring out your anti-self that now you know you can bring your best self into, right? Now what I want you to do is I want you to identify what is one thing today that you can do while you're here in this moment, on this earth, together. What is one thing you can do by the end of the day that would be best for your best self that you haven't done? It could be emailing an employee and telling them, gosh, you've been so amazing. I couldn't have done this without you. You're like, thank you for staying late. It could be calling your partner and telling them that they're a good husband or wife. What is one thing that you can do that would help your best self shine a little brighter today? I want you to share that with your partner now and let them know what you're going to be doing today. I'll have a little authentic, unique plan. And the great thing about this and why I love doing this exercise with people and you all is every answer is unique. Everyone has their, I guarantee you if I lined up all the anti-selves and all the best selves here, no one will have that same experience, that same story, that same way that they're gonna energize their best self today, that same situation that created their anti-self. So this is your own unique journey, and this is uniquely you. One thing that I'm gonna do is I've made a commitment or decision in the last week to use my platform for charitable stuff. So every week I'm gonna post on my socials, raise awareness for charities, for causes. So if you guys have anything you want me to rally behind, message me on social media, because I'll be promoting one each week. I kind of had this thought, I'm sure you guys may have this too, that like once I get here, then I'll do what? It's like I'm here, so do what? And that's how I'm trying to live my life now. So what we're gonna do to wrap this up is we're gonna do the thing we started with, the telephone. Everyone's gonna be doing a selfie. Now, what we're doing this time is I want you to allow yourself to look into your camera lens knowing that you are your best self, knowing your best characteristics, knowing the incredible man or woman that's brought you here today, the resilient person, all the positive traits. I want you to do, on a count of 3, we're gonna take a selfie together, okay? 1, 2, 3. Now I want you to look at the photo. Raise your hand if you have a different reaction to the photo than when we first started. So that is what I have. May you guys carry your best self. Within an hour, you realize very quickly who you truly are and whose life you're truly meant to live, which is your beautiful big life. Thank you, HRPA, for having me. And thanks so much, guys. Thank you.